Hi everyone, it's week 5 and we are in our final week of content before the first lecture exam. So last week I had provided you with a folder with study materials to help you prepare, as well as some information about the exam. I have that folder in this module as well, so you don't have to go back to the previous week in order to get that same exam study materials. Those are here for you as well. And as I mentioned, just like last week, there's some information on the exams. Some of the Socrative questions from this last week's survey, the week 4 survey, I specifically was looking for questions about the exam itself to see what questions you all had. Don't forget that I post answers to those questions here in the message forum. So you click on message forum and you go to response to Socrative questions, and that's where you can find all of the answers to the questions that you all have posted. So there's lots of information there this week, so please make sure you take a look at it. There's information about the format of the exam and also the best ways to prepare. Some other things include different options for sort of why there's a difference between having an essay exam and the traditional exam. And again, the reason I offer it is just for choice. Some people feel more confident when they sit and take a traditional multiple choice type exam, and others of you are less confident and you'd rather write and tell me what you know. There were some specific questions also on guidelines for the essays, so for how long they need to be and what should they include and those types of things. Don't forget that here in course materials, I have a folder called course rubrics, and the course rubrics has 3 different rubrics currently. The discussion rubric, how I'm grading you for your discussion posts. Here is the essay rubric, right? So this is what I'm looking for. And again, I kind of went into more detail on the Socrative questions in the answers this week. And then also, when we get to the green technology projects, the rubric that I use to grade you is there as well. So again, for more information and answers to those questions about the exam next week, make sure you go ahead and check out the Socrative forum. But before we get to the exam, we have one last topic to cover, and that topic is global climate change. And so there's a lot more time, let me just put it that way, that we could spend on this topic. And I know from reading some of the intro posts that we did and some of the early surveys that I had as far as topics y'all were interested in learning about, climate change happens to rank up there as one of the things that you wanted to know more about. So I will say that again, we only have a week to cover this. So it's a little bit limited in scope. But hopefully through the discussion boards, which are once again being student-led, hopefully we'll have some good articles to read and some good points to discuss there. Also, we have a lab which should help your understanding of how carbon is moving through the ecosystem, both naturally and what the impacts of burning fossil fuels has on the movement of carbon. So here in lecture materials, as the usual, I have the reading, I have a lecture video, and then I also have lecture notes. I've also given you 2 additional optional resources. This is just for your information. That's purely what it is. So one happens to do with different data sets provided by NASA. And it's interesting because you can see and actually track changes using these visuals that this data set is providing you. So you're looking at changes in sea ice, changes in sea rise, levels of how the sea is rising, also looking at carbon dioxide concentrations. So lots of really easy to look at visuals to see changes, right? So it's one thing to read the data, and it's another thing to visualize the data. So the reason that I like the Climate Time Machine is because you can visualize it and you can see what's happening. The other is a very comprehensive overview of evidence that we have gathered, scientists have gathered, about the causes of climate change. And again, this is a very comprehensive reading. It's based on a document that was published for the first time, I believe, like 7 years ago, back in 2014, by the National Academy of Sciences and the Royal Societies. And what they did is they came together and they synthesized, sort of summarized all of this data that's out there. And they said, look, here is step by step by step by step the reasons why we believe humans are causing climate change. So it's a little bit heavy as a piece goes, lots of data, lots of information. But again, for those of you who might be particularly interested in this topic, it is worth a read. And then otherwise this week for lab, as I mentioned, you'll have your lab quiz as usual. And then this week's lab is using a simulation. So we're going to use a computer simulation that looks at the impact of burning fossil fuels and the rate at which we increase the amount of fossil fuels we're using each year directly relates to where that carbon is going, right? So we know, we didn't talk about it a whole lot when we were talking about energy and matter in the ecosystems discussion, but we do know that, you know, matter cannot be created or destroyed, right? So it just moves from one form to another. So solid or liquid carbon that is locked up in the ground, once we burn it, something has to happen to that carbon, right? And so what happens is that carbon turns into a gas, and those gaseous carbon particles in the form of carbon dioxide goes somewhere, and it's entering our atmosphere, it's entering our oceans. Some of it is being brought back into organic molecules during photosynthesis, right? So plants take in that carbon dioxide and they synthesize sugars and carbohydrates and things out of them. So there's lots of different places where carbon can go. This particular lab is going to take you through several different scenarios of how carbon is being used. And what we're particularly paying attention to is we're paying attention to how much carbon is in the atmosphere. Because that carbon in the atmosphere, after all, is directly responsible for some of the warming effect that we see. So again, trapping some of that heat energy rather than allowing it to escape back into space, we're trapping more of it. And again, carbon dioxide is one of the gases responsible. There are other greenhouse gases which you'll learn about excuse me, in this particular week, but carbon dioxide is the one we talk about the most. So this is a lab video that specifically goes through the steps of the lab. So this is something you'll probably want to take a look at before you access the lab this week. No additional other assignments this week. So last week you all turned in your Green Tech project ideas. So I'm excited to take a look at those and see what you are all thinking about wanting to do for the project. In semesters past, I have had a lot of really great projects, and I've actually learned a lot about new and emerging green technology based on the projects that students have brought to our attention. So it's not only a good exercise in finding out something that's practical and probable and can help us solve some of these problems, but it's also just informative so that we know that there are people out there who are working on solutions, which is always kind of nice, because sometimes after reading these materials and going through these lessons, we can kind of start to feel a little down, like, oh, there's so many problems, right? Here are all the problems we're facing. It's nice to turn that around and also see that there are people out there who really do want to make a difference and who are trying to, like I said, tackle some of these practical problems. So discussion this week, again, still being led by a student discussion leader. Thanks to our discussion leaders. They're doing a great job so far. I've really enjoyed reading the articles that you all have posted. Keep in mind, and again, it will be pretty easy for climate change because there's going to be a lot of articles to choose from climate change. Keep in mind that you want to pick something that has points that people can talk about, right? So something that is informative for sure, but also something that's kind of thought-provoking, right? That we can kind of think about. So articles that are just basic information, you know, definitions, or lacking in specific details, those aren't as great a starting point as other articles are. Articles that present sort of a summary of data, or that present an interesting idea, or are contrary to something that we might think. Those are kind of good discussion points because it gives people something to kind of think about and to respond to. So as you're looking for articles, just kind of keep that in mind. So again, the instructions are right here if you're the discussion leader this week, and then also, of course, our check-in surveys. So I think that just about does it for week 5. Like I said, don't forget that you've got your exam study materials here. And so this is where you're going to go to get yourself prepared for the exam next week. I'm still hoping to hold study sessions the week of the exam for anyone who's interested, who wants to come with very specific questions they have, questions about the study guide, questions about the format, anything you want to talk about. I would love to have a live session and have as many students on as I can to go ahead and talk through the exam. So remember that you can sign up using the sign-up sheet right here based on how many students I have interested and what times people are available. My goal is to schedule at least 2 of these sessions, but if there's enough interest, I might even schedule 3. So I think that does it for this week. If there's any other questions you all have, please let me know. Thanks, everybody.